Start thinking of them from multiple narrative point of view and not from a single story point of view. It will take time for media to perhaps do this kind of introspection and reinvent itself to say that Chhattisgarh is not about Maoists only. Okay? Tribe in Orissa is not just about, do you know how many tribes are there in Orissa? There are 63 tribes in Orissa. But we club all of them under one umbrella saying the Adivasis. Okay, it makes it very simple for us. But they are not. Each tribe, and let's remember, the Adivasis, the name as it suggests, are the original inhabitants of this country. You, I, we all must have come from somewhere else. They are the original inhabitants of this country. And no one knows them. Because we've stereotyped them, put them into one little box and said, no, they are meant to be there in the jungles. And if at all they are going to come to the city, they are meant to be working in my house. If you are a landlord, if you have a house in Delhi, and if you have a choice of renting out your house to, let me give you an example, to a one person, let's say, who's wearing a piran and has come from Kashmir and has a beard, to another person who's come from Jharkhand and is an Adivasi. Third is a Manipuri who could be studying in, TIS or anywhere else, but has come from there. And the fourth person is you. The choice in front of the landlord is very clear. It is you are going to get the house and none of those three. Because you, in the landlord's mind, fits into the mainstream Indian look. Okay? And they don't. Now that's discrimination. So we do not only discriminate, that's a very simple form of discrimination which we see. We don't realize that because many of us, we look mainstream, we eat mainstream, we dress mainstream, and I don't understand what is mainstream and what is periphery. I mean, who has given these terms to us? Why have we started claiming ourselves mainstream? Sorry. Like I said, if anybody is mainstream, the Adivasis should have been the mainstream. How does the Adivasis suddenly start looking peripheral and I start looking mainstream? Even historically I am not. Okay? Racially I am not. But I am for all practical purposes. Now, the danger of the single story is also of how, thank you so much. I've been nursing this cough since Delhi. I'm coming here. Really sorry. But also the danger of the single story is who tells them, how they are told, when they are told, how many stories are told. And that's the power that media has. Power is the ability not just to tell the story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. If I want to dispossess you or people, the simplest way is to tell their story of starting with secondary. Start the story with the arrows of the Native Americans and not with the arrival of the British, and you have an entirely different story. So how a story is told. So A, there is a danger of single story. B is that single story is how it's going to be told. By the way I'm going to tell the story, I can dispossess it. Excuse me. So what is the power of the story? The power of the story, like I told you, that since I am just a chronicler, I said, and a storyteller, the power of the story is to be able to punch holes. So if you have those multiple narratives should be able to punch holes in your mental barriers. In the morning, someone said that there are barriers in our mind. What do we do with that? That is where the power of the story happens. I make small little holes with my stories into your mental barrier. And with that hole, you should be able to see probably helps you break the barrier. Because let me tell you, before I end, so that we have a little time for interaction. Imagine that India becomes a clean India tomorrow. Okay? Imagine that India achieves a double-digit growth. Imagine that all these successful people become even more successful in your businesses. But if we are going to dislike our neighbor because that neighbor doesn't look like me, if I'm going to dislike my other neighbor because that neighbor does not eat the same food like me, I'm not very sure of what kind of a nation we are envisaging. We dislike the other, O-T-H-E-R with an inverted commas. So the other is always full of vices. I am, and people like me are good enough, but that other has a problem. So unless we stop this negative generalization about people and places, which are created through stereotypes, and stereotypes are created by the single story that we have of those people and places, we are not going to have a nation. And something to contextualize what I'm saying to the kind of job that you all do. 80 to 90% of India's mineral wealth, its tropical forests, and bulk of its headwaters lie in the heartland of middle peninsular India and northeast India. So if you are going to make your millions, you have to go to central and peninsular India and the northeast of India. Rest of India doesn't have. Hyderabad doesn't have, I'm sorry. If you're going to make use of, over the next 50 years, 100 years, of India's wealth, natural resources, then you are going to be confronted with 90 million tribal people who live in these ethno-cultural and ecologically sensitive regions. And it is going to be your responsibility of how you deal with that. And just to, before I end, since I mentioned that, how you are, I hold the corporate responsible for media's demise, as I would say that. I mean, I'm still not writing the obituary for media, but being a practitioner myself, I hold tremendous hope, because without media you will still not be able to ascertain the truth. Because social media is something where everybody can participate. It has changed the whole paradigm of how we are going to report, but eventually it is the journalist's word which you have to take for account. But how will the journalist survive? Till about 10 years back, the revenue model was pretty much traditional. So corporates advertised, and they wanted just advertising space. And media reported. And that money was used for us to collect a report. Well, 10 years back, when the corporate decided, and I don't know, I can't substantiate that, but this is my assumption. What the corporate thought that, hey, we are going to give money. Why give money only for advertising space? Why not start controlling the news? Because the corporate figured out that without their money, they can't run. And they started controlling news. And the moment they started controlling news, the moment corporates started controlling media, media died. So if you want to bring media, if you want to bring these multiple narratives, if you want to bring the truth, like I said, what is truer than the truth, the story, if you want to listen to stories, and if you want to actually exploit India's natural resources by talking to these 90 million people, then you'll have to resurrect media by allowing media to be independent. Because if media is not independent, then media is not going to be able to do its work. And if media is not going to be able to do its work, we are not going to be a nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharjee. Single story, stereotype, it's not okay. We need to have multiple narratives, and it's all in our hands. We corporates, youngsters. Power of the story is the punch hole, which is going to have mental barriers once we start punching holes. Now I open up. Yes.
It's a privilege having you here. The conflicts and the regional conflicts have been my favorite reads. And being lucky enough to visit Assam when bombs were going left, right, and center, and also Kargil, because very close member in the family was with the armed forces. So highly sensitized to the pain and the misery, the mutilated body which come down, and how it's portrayed. on the mass media, on television, and are we covering it with reality? Are we transmitting the pain which a soldier goes through and the family goes through, and henceforth it's a percolating effect? Or are we just restricting our coverage to what is saleable, what is acceptable by the funding which comes from the corporates? Or are we really trying at taking the national conscience, which is very, very critical to the national self-esteem? And that is one part of the question. And then the single story. Now the single story of how we stereotype, how that can be broken by multiple marriages, as you suggested. Now, but how do you define those multiple marriages? That's all I want. I think that sums it up. Yeah. And what a soldier goes through is just about a 2-minute clipping on the news reel. Vis-a-vis somebody who's gone there for a beauty patient gets covered consistently, repeatedly. Now that's really tampering with the conscience.
Okay. See, situation. See, A is that those are, when you say, those are out of bound areas. So it's not like, we can keep moving around those areas, okay? So we get access only when the government or the army provides access, which is not easy. So if something happens in Siachen, how do I go? I need 15 days of acclimatization to be able to go to Siachen. I can't. So whatever photographs or information is passed on to us, only government passes, and there is hardly any information that we get. Okay, that is a problem of information. Access. Access, A, is that there is no access. Secondly, even if there is access, how do I run an office in Siachen? Forget Siachen, in LOC. Okay, where is the money? Increasingly, if you see over the last 3, 4, 5 years, you will know that there are unending television studio discussions that goes on in television, and in newspapers you will find unending opinion pieces, because that comes easy, that comes cheap, you can sit in the office and do it.
That's purely banal.
Yeah, but I'm telling you the problem. It should not be. I'm also disturbed by it. But it's obvious because reportage is expensive. Okay, so I'll give you a mathematical cost analysis. Now, and something that I have been trying to work on, and I want actually Young India to get on board. I've been speaking to Mr. Tulasiraj in December. We are having an event in Delhi, and I want to invite Young India to come on board. I want to do capacity building of grassroots journalists. And when I'm saying capacity building of grassroots journalists, these are young boys and girls along the countryside. Over the last 10 years, when there was a digital boom and a boom of television, they bought a camera, they got a computer, they can send footage. They were our primary sources. But unfortunately, we never went and explained to them what journalism was. So they don't know journalism ethics. They don't know how to pitch a story. It's only when I want them to send some footage, some pictures or some story, they do that. If we can do capacity building of that network of people, then we can achieve what you are saying, because that will be much cheaper. Currently from Delhi, if I want to send a crew to Chhattisgarh for them to go and come back, for example in Bilaspur, what happened to the sterilization tragedy, I would be spending $1 lakh rupees. If I buy from a grassroots journalist out there, I'll be buying it for 3,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees. So I can have multiple narratives. I can, over a period of time, if he is there or she is there, I can buy 10 stories, 20 stories for the cost of sending a crew just for 2 days. So it is possible. There is a revenue model which can work out there if we do this capacity building of grassroots journalists. Your second question was, I forgot.
The single story versus the multiple marriages.
The multiple narratives. So, yeah. So I am saying the multiple narratives, say for example from Kashmir. There is no time now. Otherwise, there is a wonderful story in Manipur. 7 quickly. Can I just I'll try and put it in a minute. An army captain, he gets inducted. Now there, remember, army men are hated.
Yes.
Okay, anybody in uniform is hated in conflict areas. Okay, there's a huge conflict between the population, civilian population of the army. So this young guy goes out there and he is sent out for a patrol. He goes for a patrol, and there are 4 militants holed up in a house. It's in a village. Firing begins. 1 militant is killed, 1 escapes, and 2 are caught. Okay. And our guy, his gun stops working, so he gets a grenade, comes and falls on his head, and he gets shot somewhere. So he's lying in a pool of blood, he's about to die. And two other children are also caught in the crossfire, are there, probably not very grievously injured, but they're there as well. So this, the Jawans asked the officers, this is 18 years ago, when there wasn't any mass media. In those days, if a village was found to be harboring terrorists, the entire village would be fired out of existence and no one would have known. Okay, so villages after villages were moved out of existence in our country. If you don't know that even in this country where we talk about human rights, we actually airborne. We have carpet bomb areas. We have killed people from the Air Force strikes. A lot of human rights violations have happened in this country. Now so when the Jawans came and asked this guy, sir, what should we do with these two captives? Should we gouge out their eyes, chop them? That's how the torture happens. And he said, that, a soldier has a dying message, and it has to be, a tape recorder has to be there, record the message to be played to the mother, to the family. So he said, this is my dying wish that nobody in this village is going to be touched. No, none of these two captives are going to be touched. They are fighting for a cause. I am fighting for a cause. They have to be handed over to the police, etc., etc. The Jawans were, are you serious? What kind of an officer is this? Okay, so anyway, but he said, it's my dying wish. The helicopter came to evacuate him. He said, no, first take these two children. The helicopter pilot said, I don't have permission to take civilians. He said, this is my dying wish. So, by blackmailing dying wish, he kind of transported these two. When he was taken, he somehow survived. He survived, his leg was not amputated, was supposed to be amputated, etc., etc. Now, after 16 years, he gets in touch with me. And then he finds me, doesn't get in touch with me. He didn't know me, but he discovers that I was going to that place. And he wants me to find out what has happened to those two kids. I go and I find out these two kids. The village is shocked that he's still alive. So they want to get together. And I traveled with him after that 16 years to that village. Extremely remote on the Burmese border. And you wouldn't believe that the charged atmosphere of that village. Every single person there were crying. They had brought little baskets of oranges. Because here was an army officer 16 years ago who saved them. His order of do not fire anybody, saved the entire village, saved these two children. And when he left, they made sure that not a single terrorist ever entered that village. And what is interesting is that, a small little, when a farmer's coat comes up, a man comes up and tells him, where did you get shot? And I was standing next to him and he opens his shirt and he says, I got shot here. And he looks at him and he says, but how come? I shot you here. I'm a sharpshooter. Now, and they both hug each other. Both of them came very close to killing each other. Okay? Now, this is a story. This is the multiple narrative I'm saying. So while you are saying, while we talk about army atrocities, which happens, not that it doesn't happen, when we talk about unfair practices that the armed forces have adopted time and again, but there are these stories also. These stories where army people have, almost changed the perception of an entire village, of an entire population by that one act of his. So this is the multiple narrative that I'm talking about.
And he chose to make sure that while he's working karma, he's also doing karma. He saved so many lives. It's absolutely amazing. Anybody else? I just want to ask a question to you, Mr. Raghunath. Is dharma prevalent? I know you said that you need to be smarter, but do you think it would go along with youngsters, what you're watching? You said you have gray hair, you have experience, and now you've been teaching in different countries as well. So I just wanted to know, how would you consider the dharma? You have written this book as well.
No, my...
It's on.
Yeah. No, you see, by dharma what we say is, leaders, for example, are different from the run-of-the-mill. and what distinguishes them from the rest. And if by leader, as I said, you say those who are inspiring and not those who are politicians. You know, Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister of the country, but hardly a leader. You know, similarly, if you look at this Aam Aadmi. No, the old man. Anna Hazare. He was a Havaldar in the Indian Army. There was a picture once where General Singh was sitting at his feet. Okay, so is General a leader or is a Havaldar a leader? Is Prime Minister a leader or is Prime Minister not a leader? Now you get to know, positions do not make leaders. Leaders are made by how they are exceptional, how they inspire others. For example, Kishalay talked about corporates trying to corrupt the media. Media is getting corrupted. Now there is a dharma for the corporate. If every corporate did what I am doing, will the media of this country, one of the 4 pillars of the democracy, be intact? That is the question the corporate needs to ask. And when the media falls for it, if there are, these days you talk about advertorials and so on, where editorials are paid editorials, for example. Okay, sometimes you know, sometimes you do not know. So if a newspaper baron asks himself that, look, if every newspaper were to do this, what will be the sanctity of news at all? So, this is where the leadership of whether it's the media baron or the corporate baron, asking the right questions and having that character to stick with it, that makes a difference.
I would say the conscience.
Conscience, because usually you will know the right answers, but you always take the short term. The problem is, dharma is about long term and being answerable to yourself. If at the end of your own life, if you ask yourself a few questions and you are able to actually look at your children in their eyes and tell them what you did and you're not feeling ashamed, I think that's all the life that we are talking about, and that's an inspiring life. I think that's my understanding of dharma.
Thank you, Mr. Raghunathan. With this note, I would just want to sum up by saying that you need to be selfless. That's where the dharma plays a big role. Short term, long term.
Not selfless. I showed, for example, even when we were supremely selfish, it paid to cooperate. So I'm not talking about selflessness.
No,
there is no value.
Not in a context of selflessness, in a sense, just give away everything. But what Mr. Kishalay has said about the gentleman, if he would have not taken the decision, today he's so happy, the gentleman, the story.
Exactly.
He was selfless. I mean, he never thought about himself but the rest. That is where I'm from.
He could tell the story to his children.
And now when he went back, he's been hugged by and, applauded by so many people. The village stayed intact. So dharma and karma goes hand in hand. Thank you very much. With this note, thank you.
Thanks, sir.